You are listening to the MTech Group podcast series, your source for trends about automated QA testing for the insurance industry.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Spencer.
So I just wanted to reach out this afternoon to discuss QMT's test case generation. I noticed there's minimum versus maximum test generation. And being in QA for the past 25 years, I have great interest in this. And I want to deep dive into how QMT's test generations options can help drive efficiencies while keeping proper test coverage. Do you have a few minutes to discuss?
Sure. Do you want to discuss this because you don't want to discuss the Leafs?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep my hopes up, but not too positive as of yet. But you know what? The blue and white still have a chance, so let's hold on.
Okay, we'll discuss happier things instead.
Thank you.
For me, test max and test min, the minimum coverage addresses the fact that it is very difficult to fully test all the different parameters that you will that are involved in a given model. When you use test or maximum test coverage, the basics are that there is a model and there's a number of parameters. Things like is the applicant male or female? What is their age? Where do they live? Because there's jurisdictional impact on policies. Other things that affect risk and various things like salary. There's a whole number of parameters. And when you combine all those parameters together, in order to fully test any model, you basically want to test every single combination of every single parameter. And that can result in a large number of tests. The example that we often use is if you had 30 questions and each of them only had 2 answers, the number of possible combinations that you would want to test in order to test everything would be 1 billion different combinations and test cases. I'm using combinations loosely here. I'm not distinguishing between permutations and combinations, but there'd be 1 billion of them. And if you were to test and try to test each one of those, and you actually had to test against a third-party system, because you're doing end-to-end testing, if it took a second for every single test to execute, that could take 30 years. Now, that's a little bit of extreme, but that's how big the problem can be if you're doing maximum test coverage. Now, it's known that not all the various combinations of parameters is important, but it's often not known which ones are important. But given that you can't test every single combination, you want to do something else. And we have a couple of different options in MTech. And one of the ones we have, in QMT, and one of the options we have is what we call minimum. And our minimum test coverage is basically we recognize the fact that you can't test all the combinations, but what we can do is at least make sure that every single possible value is tested once. And that's what minimum test coverage does. It takes a look at your model, and the model may have flows, conditions where it goes to different branches based on the different parameters. And in analyzing the model, it basically takes a look at all the different inputs that you have and all these different conditions. And from that, it comes up with a list of all the different parameter values that need to be tested in order to test all the branches of the model, so that everything is tested at least once. And that's basically what it is. It doesn't test all the combinations. There may be cases where you want to do more than minimum, and that's where we have the option to specify specific combinations of parameters. But the minimum one basically makes sure that every single path and every single parameter in the model is tested at least once. And the difference between that 1 billion test cases and 30 questions with just 2 answers each is basically in the latter. And I'm doing this off of the top of my head, so I may be off, but it would probably be 60 test cases for the minimum test coverage versus 1 billion. So it is a drastic decrease in the resources required to test and also in the time that it would take to actually run the tests.
Okay,
that was a rather
right.
long-winded response.
So let me just understand this. If I understand correctly, then so let's say we're doing a testing of our system, and if I want to do, let's say, stuff like a smoke test, right? I can actually use minimum, and I'll make sure I have coverage of all at least all possible test routes and decisions in my knowledge graph. Correct?
Yes. Smoke test is
Okay.
a good way of saying it too. It's like it'll look for the obvious things, sending up smoke to show it's a problem. The other thing is that it's a better than happy path test, because happy path tests are basically just, the very minimum. This
Right.
covers everything. So it's something that's better than happy path and in the smoke path type thing. Yes.
Okay, and then if we actually, let's say we want to drill down on a certain area, then we actually put our own inputs into that area of the decision tree, and then that way we can focus in on one part of the decision tree and make sure that that's working as well.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. But that's exactly it. Where you want tests that you don't think are in the minimum coverage, you can customize it in that way.
Okay, I actually think I see some really good areas where we could do that. Specifically, if we're introducing new projects, which actually are addressing specifics in a decision tree, then that way we would actually use those part of the knowledge graph to actually test that. That'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
What about the how hard is it to update the knowledge graph? Is it easy to update the knowledge graph so we can expand our testing?
Yeah, it's actually reasonably trivial. When you're using our editor, if, for example, you're testing against a web page and another question was added, you can basically, the workflow would represent all those steps as nodes connected to each other. So basically where the new question was added, you would disconnect two of the nodes, add the new nodes that represent that new question, and just reconnect those nodes back in. So if you say at step 5, between step 5 and 6, there were some additional steps. You disconnect 5 from 6, connect 5 to the new nodes, connect the new nodes to 6, and you're done. It's drag and drop. It's intuitive and almost trivial.
And then I will generate the brand new test cases.
Yeah, you generate the new test cases. Our test generation step will analyze the model. If you introduce new parameters in those additional nodes, then it will pick those up and appropriately generate the new tests for that as well. And again, at that point, you can do minimum or maximum on that.
Excellent.
So
That's actually
that part's basically
perfect.
automatic. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes actually things really easy because when we want to actually create new test cases, all we have to do is update the model and then regenerate.
Yep. And test generation is reasonably quick, especially when you consider, the fact that you could have a billion test cases and how long it would take to execute the test. Test generation is very fast and a lot faster than, say, a human can do it. Somebody trying to figure out the minimum test case coverage, it would be a lot quicker, or sorry, a lot slower than our test generation algorithm could do it.
Wow, I think that's really good. I could see many different ways of using this because when we actually do our testing, there's a lot of times where we actually want to we want to actually just quickly go through the system, make sure everything's working. And also then when we want to get into more deeper coverage, all we have to do is select larger amounts of the model, correct?
Yes.
Perfect.
And then we were discussing this before. You were talking about the possibilities of using this for performance tests and
yeah.
and other cases.
Can you maybe give me an idea of how we would use this for performance testing?
Well, when you mentioned that, my first thought was I was thinking regression tests, but in one way, in a way, those things are common. Once you've generated the tests, you've got that test suite that can be run again and again and again. And you run it, if you're running it for regression tests, you just run it, and see whether the website and everything still passes all the tests. If you're thinking about performance tests, well, along the same lines, it's like you will, for each time you run it, you've got a history. You can see how long each of the steps took, and you can see which step is actually taking a long time. But so from that way, you can drill down and check out the performance of the various aspects of the model and the systems you're testing. But then you can also, like you could with regression tests, keep rerunning the performance tests and confirm, for example, that if you were to run the performance tests in parallel, run them multiple times, whether or not the systems you're testing get slow under the strain, or you can just monitor that these systems are regularly performing at the same level if you run the tests one after the other. So these models and the generated tests that can be executed are actually, they're suitable for both regression and performance testing.
Yeah, so I'm seeing just many different ways of using this. And actually I like the fact that you can it's basically all automated, right? You just it calls the model that you're using under test. It runs the test generation. You have your test cases ready to be executed. So,
Yeah.
and then you can actually very easily manipulate that depending on what you're testing and then regenerate again. So, I think this is basically a game changer from what we traditionally have done in the past. So I like it.
Yeah. And one of the things when you mention automated, it's interesting because one of the things we're doing is we automate the testing of a website. There's tools that do that, and they allow you to record the test site, and you can generate automated tests for that. But we take that to another level in that we automate the generation of suitable tests that can either fully test the site or whatever it is that we're under test, or we can come up with minimal test coverage. And when we do that, the algorithm, again, it's automated. It's quicker, it's consistent. There's less chance of the errors that are made when you have somebody manually trying to figure out all the different test cases. So we're doing sort of second level automation here that's beyond what a lot of the other what people I think are used to, which I think really helps as well.
I really do. I think this is actually really good because it's significantly better than using manual testing. It's faster. It's actually, I would expect that it's going to be actually more accurate. And the coverage is, you can select the coverage all the way up to every single possible scenario imaginable. So
Yep.
you really have a sweet spot here. You have either you want to be efficient, you can be automated, and you got your test coverage, right? So then, those are kind of the three things that you look for when you're actually doing testing. And I'm really looking forward to actually working with this product because I think this is going to be, like I said, it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, Jeff, I'm going to have to get going, but if you want to actually cheer for those Leafs, I'm with you because I believe, I believe. I tell you, I think we got it. We're going to have to put our heads down. We have 2 games to go, but go Leafs, go.
Yeah, I mean, I really want them to win, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Well, good talking to you, and we'll touch base soon.
Okay, see ya.
Okay, bye, Jeff.
Bye.